Hello and welcome to another 140k Imperial Guard Tactics video. Now before we get into today's video, I would like to say a big thank you to Gary for sending in some pictures of his absolutely fabulous Militarm Tempestus Scions with a boatload of assassin support. Gary is actually one who I met at the LGT and we had lots of awesome conversations about Guard, and in fact he got best in faction because he was using a really cool list. It was a combination of lots of Scions and Dakar Primes, which as we know are fantastic, and then he was running 8 assassins. That's right, 8 assassins in one go. It was pretty cool, and he ended up going 3 and 2 at the LGT, doing very, very well, representing the Guard very nicely, sir. And I have to say, looking fantastic whilst doing it. So thank you guys for sending these pictures in. Awesome list, very unique, very cool, and if anyone else has got any cool pictures they want me to use in my videos, then please post them on my Facebook page, or you can email them to me at mordianglorytv@gmail.com, and don't worry, they will be linked to the Facebook page and the email address will be down in the description below. Without further ado, let's crack on with today's video. Now today guys, I want to do a video on list building. You see, a lot of games of 40k are won or lost before you have even put down the first model, before you even deployed anything. People say that games are won and lost in the deployment phase, and that is true. I have certainly lost many games from a botched deployment, and I've certainly won many games when my deployment's been okay and my opponent has done a bad deployment. But that's not what we're going to talk about today. To be honest, before you even deploy the first model, it can come down to list building. Now, of course, there are some factions which are stronger than others, but taking 2 fairly balanced factions against each other, what's then going to really determine if, if the game's won or lost before any dice are rolled, is going to be the lists. Now, I have seen and I have built many lists in my time, and there is essentially a few golden rules for if you're going to be doing building a good list or if you're going to be building a bad list. And so what I thought I'd do today, guys, is a bit of a noob friendly video, but also it's a good opportunity for the more veteran members of the community to put some feedback down in the comment section below and to provide a little bit of guidance for fellow Guard commanders, for new Guard commanders out there. I know with the release of the Octaris box and Plastic Krieg, I've been seeing a lot of people getting into the Guard for the first time, which is absolutely fantastic. You know, we need more meat for the grind, and we need everyone to grab a rifle and stand a post and hold a line. So it's important for us veteran players to be able to give what advice we can to the newer players of the Guard community, because the Guard, I think, is one of the best factions, and we want them to stick around. So what we're going to be going through today, guys, is some just basic list building advice. Now, this is going to be primarily focused on the Imperial Guard, but at the same time, you can take these lessons and apply them to almost any faction. So I hope you guys are looking forward to it, and we'll jump into sort of the first point now. So the first thing you want to take into account when you're building the list, the first thing you want to do is to have a plan. So there is kind of a golden rule in 40k, which is like, well, just buy the models that you like because it's cool and additions come and additions go. And that is true if we're taking things from a really zoomed out perspective. You obviously have to enjoy what you're painting, but at the same time, one of the biggest issues I see with lists in general, both ones that I make myself and ones that I have seen people use in the past, is it's just a bit of a random concoction, a random collection of models. Now sometimes that works, sometimes the stars align and just you throw a bunch of random shite together and this beautiful thing comes out of it and it works. But that's not really the case. Now, of course, for newer players who are just starting out, you could be like, oh, no, well, I might have bought something that's wrong and Morning Glory is telling me to bin it off. No, nothing like that. But when you're very first getting into the game, obviously go with what you like. But at the same time, kind of have an idea of what sort of list you want to put together. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a meta chasing list. You've got to get the Admech planes and chicken walkers, a bunch of Skitarii and stuff like that. No. But the first way to have a good foundation for a list is to have a plan and to have like a theme for your list. So if you're the kind of player that likes tanks, then you want to be obviously focusing on getting tanks, but you want to make sure that you're not just throwing a bunch of random tanks together. Oh, I'll have a Hellhound and a Devil Dog and one Basilisk and two normal Leman Russes, and you know that's a random concoction. You know, think about what these units are going to do in your army. So, okay, if you like tanks, for example, you could be like, well, I'm going to need some tanks that can do some long-range shooting. So I'm going to want maybe some artillery, like a Manticore or a Basilisk, or maybe a Leman Russ armed with a battle cannon. Because you will go online and you'll see people that say, just take the Martial Cannon Leman Russes, they're the best. But I went to LGT, and my number one unit every single game when I was using my tanks was my Battle Cannon Leman Russ, because my Demartial Cannons were good, but they often moved forward and died. But I had a plan for those Demartial Cannon Russes, but I also had a plan for that Battle Cannon Russ. And everything worked together. So my number one unit was that Battle Cannon Russ, because it allowed me to have some long-range fire support. So you make sure, okay, I've got some long-range fire support on my list, but I'm also going to need to take objectives. Well, what's good at taking objectives? Well, I'm going to need something that can move a bit quicker, something that can do a bit more punch up close and personal. Maybe that's where you start thinking, okay, well, I need a couple of Hellhounds or Chimeras with infantry inside. So the point is, rather than just throwing something into a list because it's cool, I like the Death Strike, it looks cool. Rather than doing that, actually have a think about what that unit is going to do in your army and what role it's going to fulfill. So have a plan. That is the first thing to do. And the easiest way to have a plan is to have a theme. Now, not always, in fact, often themed lists will be, they're a bit tricky, because I like pure infantry, for example. So I tend to run loads and loads of infantry. And I know that in a lot of games that I go into, my opponents just simply won't have the volume of fire to deal with that much infantry. So I'm going to win those games. But then occasionally I'm going to come across someone who absolutely has the number of dice to just churn through 300 bodies, and I'm just going to get hard counted and lose. So themed lists will get you a certain distance, but you're going to have to bear in mind that at some point you're going to reach a point of diminishing returns and you're going to have to evolve your thinking. But if you're starting out, then having a themed list is definitely a good thing to keep in the back of your mind. I like tanks, I like infantry. If you're a person that likes a bit of everything, then that's where you want to start thinking about balance. Okay, what am I? And we start going back to that thing that we're talking about, plan, to go back to the first point. Because themes is kind of point 1, point 5, point 2. But the first point is have a plan. So if you like a bit of everything, you need to decide, well, my infantry are going to do this job, and my tanks are going to do this job. And that's part about having a plan. So the first two things I take into account is, firstly, have a plan. And the easiest way to have a plan is to have a theme. Because if you know what your theme is, it makes it easier for you to select units and to remind yourself what you need to start completing the plan. Okay, I've got lots of infantry, but I haven't got a lot of fire support, so maybe I need some more heavy weapon teams. Stuff like that. So those are the first two biggies. Those are the main points that if you don't take away anything else in this video, those are the two things that you're going to want to do. Yes, of course, getting cool models is cool, but at the same time, if we want to win games, then, just throwing random shit at the wall and seeing what sticks won't often work. You need to have a plan. So those are the first 2 points. Now the third point is kind of linked to the first two. And the third point is, so you might say, but Morning Glory, I'm literally just starting out. I don't know, what's good and what's not. I mean, I kind of like tanks. So I get a bunch of tanks together, but I don't know what... These tanks come with loads of different weapon loadouts. What do I pick? And it's like, okay, well, the next thing that you're going to have to do is... And this is going to sound a bit strange, but you're going to want to be playing lots of games. Why are we talking about playing games and list building? Well, playing games will inform your list building. Now, a big mistake that I often see people doing is they will go out, they'll buy a huge amount of models. Feels great, right? Dropping those fat stacks of cash on Warhammer. And I highly encourage, if you enjoy doing that, go forth and do that. It feels great. We all love treating ourselves. Treat yourself, right? But you don't necessarily have to wait until your 2,000 point list is all fully built and fully painted before you play your first game. What I would do is, when you're first going out there and you're putting your list together and whatnot, is play a 500 point game. Play 3 500 point games. Get an idea for what works. So you're there. Maybe you've got 3-4 squads of infantry and you've got a Leman Russ. Start collecting box set and a few extra goodies. And you're like, okay, well, I like what I've got here, But you know what? I'm finding that Eradicator turret, you know, that Nova Cannon, it's really... doesn't really have the punch that I need it, you know. And I thought that Ignore Cover ability would be cool, but actually it's not really coming into it very much. So you know what? I think I'd be better off having a Demolisher Cannon. And you'll learn that by playing games. Because until you've played enough games for things to just become instinctive, which will happen surprisingly quickly. You know, once you've played half a dozen... Well, maybe not half a dozen. Maybe when you've played like sort of 2 or 3 dozen games, you'll just get an instinct for, well, obviously that works. Because you'll be able to read the paper better. So you play games... and it will then help you inform your list of making decision. So you don't end up going too far down a path, going too far down a list before you know what's good and what works and what doesn't work. So build your 500 point list with your theme, with your plan in mind, and then figure out from brutal experience, from often you'll learn more from your losses than you will from your victories. You'll learn what works and you'll be like, right, you know what? Putting those grenade launchers or those flamers and those special weapons in my infantry squads just didn't really achieve much. But if I take those out, I could put like 2 heavy bolters on the side of my Lehman Russ. And you know what? That Lehman Russ could then be a tank commander. And that'll actually hit harder and that'll work better. So you'll only learn that and you'll only start getting an instinct for that by playing games. Which is why you see this phrase online so much of, you've got to have reps. You've got to have reps with your game. And it's kind of like a gym bro sort of... analogy, I imagine. You know, I have no idea. I haven't been to the gym in a long time. You know, the commissar would definitely execute me for lack of fitness if he came around anytime soon. But the point is that you've got to play games, and the best thing to do is to start off small, play 500 point games, you know, sort of synthesize. I like to use this term like homogenize or distill. I like to distill. You want to distill your 500 point, sort of 1,000 point games, and then you're like, okay, that worked at 500 points. I'm going to go up to 1,000 points. Get a few more toys in there. Right, cool, that works. Oh no, that didn't work. And you'll start getting a sense of, well, this works at 500 points, but it doesn't work at 1,000 points. It doesn't scale well enough, you know. So that's what you want to do. So you want to have a plan. You want to have it. The easiest way to have a plan is to have a theme. And the best way to build a good 2,000 point list is to build up to it and then get you lots of experience at different point levels so that when you get to 2,000 points, nothing's wasted. And you've not had to hang around waiting before you get involved. You get your games under your belt and you get to 2,000 points. And you're like, oh, I'm at 2,000 points and I know what works. And I haven't wasted any time or money or build options or models along the way. And that's the best way to do it. So that's my sort of point number 3. You know, get experience at lower levels before you reach straight for that 2K list. Because... you know, you don't want to get the worst feeling. The number one reason, okay, the number one thing that I see people quitting 40k over is they go out, they buy a 2k list, they go out, they build it and paint it, they put all the effort into it, or, you know, they pay someone a lot of money to build it and paint it for them, and they finally hit the tabletop and they get creamed. And all these ideas that they thought worked, oh, those death strikes are so cool, they've got to obviously be good in game, and all those ideas just fall apart. And then they go, well, this is shit. My army's shit. I don't want to stick with Guard anymore. I'm going to quit and go to another faction. Or I'm just going to quit 40k entirely, which is a shame because 40k is a lot of fun. Competitively, narratively, 40k is a lot of fun. It's a great universe to sort of immerse yourself in. The number one reason that I see people leave early on is they just, like Icarus, they fly too close to the sun. They go too hard, too fast, too quickly. And it's a real shame. So pace yourself, you know. Build up to it. So that would be my 3rd point on how to have a good list. So my 4th point kind of links into the 3rd point about not racing for that 2k list, which is you've got to be careful for fluff upgrades or for padding your list out with a lot of upgrades. You see, one of the things that you see a lot of people doing when they want to reach 2k is they'll be like, well, I'll just give everyone a plasma pistol. I'll give all my officers power swords. And it's like, well, that's not a good idea. And in general, you really have to be careful with spending points on fluff upgrades. That's what I would call them, for padding upgrades. Because think, using the officer, for example. Your officer, if you look at his stat line, is unimpressive. In fact, in comparison to a lot of like basic Primaris Marines these days, an assault intercessor is going to tear a company commander limb from limb, and it's going to win that fight every single time. And the assault intercessor costs like less than your company commander. So why, that's just when he's just got a chainsword. So your company commander is clearly not there to be a combat powerhouse. So why are you giving him combat upgrades? Oh, it looks cool. Every officer should have a cool sword, and when you're playing a narrative game, you don't worry about it so much. That's fine. But when you're building a competitive list, you really can't afford to have those fluff upgrades because they all add up surprisingly quickly. They'll add up surprisingly quickly. And so before you know it, you've gone and spent 60 points on a power fist here, a power sword there, a plasma pistol here. And you're like, yeah, but 60 points, what's that really going to get me? Like an extra infantry squad? And it's like, yeah, an extra infantry squad. Might not seem like a lot, but all of those power weapons and plasma pistols and whatnot that you've put in your officers combined together aren't actually going to do any damage. They're not going to do much at all. But that extra infantry squad, it might not do a lot of damage either, but it's 10 extra bodies you can get on an objective. It's potentially 36 extra lasgun shots a turn. It's a move. It's a move blocker. That 10-man squad is going to do a lot more than all the power fists and plasma pistols combined because we're not a combat army. Okay? So why are you spending combat upgrades on your officers? This is one of the, I would say, sort of intermediate issues that I see a lot of people make when they're doing their lists. And it's a real shame because I want to give my officers power swords. I want to give, Lieutenant Steve that power fist. I have a model. It's an Orcadian lieutenant. He's the oldest one. He always does well with that power fist, but he often won't really get a chance to use it. And you might think, oh, well, I've only got like 5 power swords, my officer's Morning Glory. That's only like 25 points. Okay, yeah. That's only 25 points. It's 25 points of nothing. It's literally not, those officers aren't going to do anything with those powers, so you don't want them in combat because you're probably giving up assassinate points at that point. But that 25 points, oh yeah, that's an extra platoon commander who's going to be doing an order every single turn. Who could be, with a squad of veterans or a company or a command squad, be doing a lot of take aim. Or who could be doing move to steal an enemy's objective and deny them primary points. Or who, again, could simply be just blasting out first rank fire, second rank fire every single time. And over the course of the game is contributing, 100 plus lasgun shots to your army. When you put it that way, that 25 points was actually pretty important. And wasting it on power swords was not a good idea. Again, it's a shame. And we're talking about competitive list building. So this kind of, you've just got to squeeze every point. We're in 9th edition now. We can't really afford to be inefficient in the current state that we're in. We just can't really afford it. Now, one last thing I want to mention. Because obviously if you're a newer player, this is kind of important. It's like, if you're a newer player, you might be watching this video and be thinking like, well, I don't know what's the right choice to make. I've got to be agonizing on, do I take this, do I take that? Don't worry about it too much. These are guidelines. These are principles you want to adhere by. But until you play, as I mentioned before, until you play those games yourself, you won't know what works and what won't work. A lot of people will tell you, for example, that a Lord Commissar is a really not a good unit choice. Why would you ever take a Lord Commissar? I never leave home in my infantry army without one. Because I need that Lord Commissar to fill out an extra battalion. Oh, well, you could take Primaire Psychers. Well, I find Primaire Psychers are fine, and they're a good unit choice, but for me, I'd rather take a Lord Commissar, which then allows me to take Master of Command on him. Again, a lot of people will tell you, Master of Command is not a good warlord trait to put on a Lord Commissar. I find it one of the best ones in the Codex, because I need every order, and I need to be able to spread those orders out across a wider net as possible, so that I've got as much flexibility as possible. So you've got a unit there and a warlord trait there, which people online would tell you don't work. But because I have a theme, I've gone pure infantry. And I have a plan for that unit, I want him to help spread my orders out, then it works, And it's actually not bad. And I know that because I played a lot of games. And I haven't equipped that Commissar, with loads of fluff upgrades or anything. And I've played games at every level, and I know that Lord Commissar works. So don't agonize over unit choices. The best thing you can do is go out there, play games, build models, make mistakes, and learn. That's the best thing you can do. And that is the best thing for learning how to build a good list. Also, what you have to remember is what is good right now may not be good later. So don't be agonizing over unit choices, okay? You'll find what works, and when the next edition comes out or the next codex comes along, those melter guns might not be as good as your plasma guns. That's fine. But it doesn't mean you have to rip all your melter guns apart or anything like that. It just means that the melter guns go away for a bit and the plasma guns come out for a bit. It means the grenade launchers go away and the flamers come out. It just means you just build up, I would say, you build up like resilience, addition resilience. And eventually, if you just take your time, it's marathon, not a sprint. If you take your time, you'll have loads of experience on your belt. You'll have a list which you'll be good with, and you'll do really well with, and might catch a few people off guard. And it's really distilled and really streamlined. And you know, some people might be like, "Why are you taking those grenade launchers on those veterans?" It's like, well, actually, I take the grenade launchers and the missile launcher on the veterans. They're nice and cheap. I keep them back, and I use them to just lob out crack grenades every turn. They're a low priority target, but they get to fire every turn, which means by the end of the game they've achieved something. Theme, plan, all that kind of stuff. You've learned that through experience, and that's what I mean. So don't worry about what you're putting together when you're first starting out, and don't worry if you think you've made a mistake, because you can always, I guarantee you, an addition will come around and it'll be much, much better. You'll take one thing off the shelf and you'll put another thing on the battlefield. So there we go. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. To all my veteran commanders out there, please put down lots of comments and advice and feedback. For all my newer players out there, please ask lots of questions. Either myself or one of the absolutely fantastic members of this community will get back to you. You'll probably find multiple people get back to you with lots of different answers and lots of different things. Some of them, they might look like they're conflicting, but there's not necessarily one right answer, and it's just lots of information for you to have at your fingertips. So, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. If you have enjoyed today's video, please consider heading on over to the old Patreon page. There'll be a link down in the description below. I don't do levels or ask for certain amounts or anything like that. $1, $20, I'm just grateful for any support that you guys can give me. And of course, a huge thank you to my current Patreon supporters. It's thanks to these guys that I'm able to go out there and play lots of competitive games, go to lots of tournaments, and bring back information to share with you guys. So big thumbs up for the Patreon supporters. You guys are fantastic. But without further ado, we'll end the video there. Hope you guys have enjoyed it, and of course, I'll see you guys next time.